Many of us men today are struggling with self-worth, feeling like we're not enough or capable to provide for ourselves and create the lifestyle we want. And that ends up projecting out into the world as a fear of not being good enough for the type of relationship that we want or the opportunities that we want in business or in our careers. It can lead to a feeling of feeling stuck, stalling out, and not knowing what to do about it. And to make that worse, it's difficult to find quality role models when there's so much noise and drama being perpetuated in the social media spaces. So what can we do about this as men? If that question weighs on your mind, you're going to love my guest today. Thomas Edwards is a professional wingman, and he has been coaching men for the past 15 years on exactly this. And we have an amazing conversation where we dive into why this happens with us and what to do about it. What are the proper mindsets and how do you get the help and take the actions that are going to help you to feel more empowered and to stop putting so much damn pressure on yourself and realize that where you're at is the right place to be, but it's also time to take some action. Thomas has been featured in People magazine as well as many other media establishments, and I think you're going to really enjoy this conversation. I know I did. I'm your host, Eric Coplen, and welcome to another episode of The Music of Life. I'll see you inside. Mr. Thomas, welcome to the show, brother.
Thanks for having me, man. How are you?
I'm very well, man. I'm grateful to get to chat with you. Our mutual friend, Ray, he recommended we have a conversation. And after talking to you, it was like we have a lot of common philosophies, a common history, especially in the whole like dating and attraction world, which I thought was really funny. So we were talking off camera, and I had a question for you because you are like you call yourself a professional wingman, if I understand, right?
Yes.
And actually, before I ask the question, why don't you just give like real quick, tell us like a little bit of your background and like how you ended up becoming a professional wingman.
Yeah. So
what does that mean?
I started the professional wingman over 15 years ago. So back in 2009. I was still in a place where I wanted to know what I wanted to do for a career or business. One thing I knew I loved was personal development. And I loved helping people become better. One of the common things that people came to me for advice on was with not just women, but how do you build a life that's enjoyable and fun? People saw me, going out and enjoying meeting strangers or going on these adventures. And they just kept asking me, Thomas, how are we able to do that? And so I would give them advice, and they would go and they would do it, and they start to see success themselves. One key component that was common when people came to me was around how do I communicate with women? And that's really what it was. People wanted to learn how to be a better communicator, and then they wanted to leverage that to date more high quality women. So one day I was at South by Southwest in Austin, Texas. This was 2009. And I wanted to figure out what I wanted to do with my life. And a friend of mine saw a really attractive woman and wanted me to introduce them. Yeah, he literally asked me to be his wingman and introduce him to her so they can connect. And so I did that. And they ended up going on a lunch date the next day, and he ended up paying for my drinks and meals the whole weekend as a thank you. And I thought, man, I bet it'd be really cool to be someone else's wingman. And I love the idea of going pro, like an athlete. So that's when the professional wingman was born. And the whole premise was to help people, predominantly men, but I did work with a lot of women, on developing their social skills so they can go out and find that long-term committed relationship, find that love that they were looking for. And so I would go out and give them real-time feedback on what prevented them from making those connections happen. And it was beautiful. I loved it. And I was really good at it. Over 15 years, 400 plus marriages and engagements, plenty of kids around, currently 0 divorces.
These are all yours?
Yeah. Yeah, right. Might be responsible for quite a few. Who knows? Yeah. And, the big number that I started to really pay attention to was the 0, the divorces. I have clients who've been married for 10 years now, and they're still together. So I started to see some common threads around communication, around confidence, around lifestyle optimization, around holistic development. Because it wasn't just about the women that these guys were coming to me for. It was about, how do I embody being enough and then present myself in such a way that attracts the kind of woman I want in my life? And how do I create a lifestyle that's conducive to meeting and attracting those type of women? So over time, I had my own kind of, dark night of the soul, and we can always get into that. But it then ended up me, kind of showing up on the other side, realizing that this concept doesn't just revolve around women. This revolves around any area of life where a man wants to be better. There's a part of them that fears this idea around failure, around not being good enough, about the constant pressure to perform and what comes with the responsibility if you do perform, and can you sustain it, right? We all have this internal talk. And I just realized, being a dad and having a soon to be 7-year-old and seeing the scope of the world as I see it now, I felt like my legacy, my opportunity to create a legacy, would be in the future leaders of this world. If I were to go on and die, which will happen eventually, I want my daughter to live in a world where there are powerful masculine leaders that can keep things in order and allow her to go off and live the life that she's meant to live. And so the way for me to do that is to find these guys or call these guys and empower them to overcome this imposter syndrome so they can go out and lead extraordinary lives that's filled with impact, purpose, fulfillment, but most importantly, joy. To be able to enjoy the whole process of it all unfolding, the growth, the pain, the success, the failure, all of it. And treat life like a game and play to win.
Yeah, that's great. My personal history, when I was 24, that's when I got kind of introduced to some life-changing material around that same subject. It was the whole double your dating, Eben Pagan era, and
David D'Angelo.
And it was before the word like pickup came around, or pickup artist or anything like that. I never associated myself really with that. But I did it was really about it. It's women really serve as amazing mirrors, in my opinion. Kind of get your thought on this, like when you're coaching guys, because I noticed that it was funny whenever I first entered that world. You don't feel like you're you don't even realize that you don't feel like you're enough, but it shows up in the form of fear and the stories that you tell yourself as to why she's not going to like me, or I don't have enough money, or I'm not tall enough, or you pick whatever litany of endless reasons that you want. You find these kind of excuses, and they're really just the product of fear. And it's so funny, it's the hardest thing to believe is that having absolute belief in yourself, as evidenced by your willingness to act on that, is one of the most attractive and seductive things that you can possibly embody as a human being, and especially as a man. And women are literally wired, in my opinion, they're wired and designed to respond to that, to cheerlead that, and to reject you when you don't accept that within yourself. What are your thoughts on that?
I totally agree on so many levels. I feel like, guys, because men may not feel like they're good enough, then it creates this second deep fear, which is, if I'm not good enough, then I can't be loved. And that drives men crazy, right? They will go to the ends of the earth to figure out how they can solve that fear, because that's what they believe will make them whole. And when we go out and we try to learn how to communicate with women, I too never came from the pickup community. In fact, I was late to even knowing its existence after the Professional Wingman started to take off. But, underneath the canned openers and the terminology and, the game, so to speak, was this psychological concept of what happens when you are courageous and you just go for it and you shoot your shot, right? In a sea of men who aren't willing to do that, the very few who are willing to, they're the ones that get the spoils. Doesn't mean that they get it and they keep it, but for that moment, they're the ones that are seen as the winners. And it doesn't take a lot. it just takes that courage. And like what you said, the core belief is that it's possible. Like when I think about the cycle of how confidence is built, I always start by saying confidence isn't necessary to do something. It's the result of doing something. So if you don't need confidence to do something, well, what do you really need? Well, I dissected it myself and I saw that it really actually starts with faith. Faith in either yourself, the process, a higher power, support system, whatever it is, that is where it starts. And with faith then comes courage. And then with courage comes then action, right? And then through that process, then you can get the feedback that will ultimately lead to either an increase in confidence or a decrease in confidence, right? And that's judged by your thoughts and your feelings. But guys who believe in themselves and have the faith is a great starting point.
Well, let me present something like kind of relevant in the world today, like, and get your thoughts on this, because basically maybe to use like three examples that especially younger guys might be coming across today. And this stuff applies across the gamut of your life. You know, these principles don't go away. There's circumstances and logistics and in your priorities may shift, but these principles are like, they're first principles that apply your whole life. Just to put a nail into that one, I think it was Robert Kiyosaki. I heard him talking about how he had, here's a guy, rich dad, poor dad. He's a wealthy dude. You think he's a successful dude. He's got it, and he kind of started resting on his laurels, and his woman was like, I don't want this. He's like, so he needed to go out and find some kind of mission again. You got to like stay active and do something, create some purpose. So in the world today, there's always been like three types of guys. Okay. There's always like three types of guys, and two of them are extreme and one of them is integrated. Okay. And balanced. So there's the soft, nice guy, which is what I had to recover from. Okay. Yeah. And that's where you might romanticize relationships a little too much. You can end up being like the Disney dad. You end up focusing on the way your value is in giving affection and gifts or love or like providing even. And it's a half truth because there's aspects of that are true, but then they don't have their darker side integrated, and so they may lack boundaries, and they're kind of a pushover and have the areas of struggle in their life where they feel like they don't have power, and probably particularly with other men in a lot of cases, which translates to the women. They're the guys that often gets cheated on, right? And it can go really dark and bitter where you get like the, kind of stuff. So I see that it turned into kind of like the men going in their own way kind of stuff. And, I mean, that's a little more blanket, but what's the term? The beta male, whatever. I hate these words, but it's something that's used. So there's a lot of I feel like there's a lot of that out in the world. And then there's two messages those guys are being competed to buy into. One of them is like the Andrew Tate, hyper alpha, supposedly alpha type of person that is in touch with that darker side, that very kind of even Machiavellian or just the edgy darkness, which is erotic and impactful and effective in the world and creating physical results. People will respond to it. It's very tactical and it works. But you see that kind of where it can go to the extreme of where you begin to wonder, is that starting to err into the territory of narcissism and these, whatever, these kind of things where it's not really, where's the love, right? And then you have like the Ben Shapiro, right? He's trying to come in and say, no, you need to it needs to be marriage and it needs to look this way. And if it's not, there's a lot of mixed messages out there. So guys, in aiming for what is it they even want, with the relationships. So not only are they struggling with maybe integrating their own shadow, or which could be, that they need to be more kind, or it could be that they actually need to be less kind, depending on their situation, which is a layer of complexity. How does a guy looking for a role model today, what type of first principles can he align with so he can move towards meaningful, relationships and results in his life in a way that's going to keep him grounded and not lost down maybe like an extreme path or something? And what are even your thoughts on, you can even, riff on those examples I gave. I'd love to hear your opinion on that.
Yeah, these are great. This is a great question, because I feel like this is one of the deeper challenges that I think the modern man goes through is, where do I go, and in what direction makes sense? And how do I live what can be considered an integrated sense of being? And here's the truth, and this is not a cop-out. I'm going to go deeper into this. The truth is there are spectrums to the spectrums, right? And so if you look at the spectrum of, what constitutes, I also am not a fan of beta male, but I don't mind using the term weak. And what I mean by weak, I mean internally weak, not in terms of physical or external assets or aesthetics, but just internally weak, like you're emotionally fragile, that you lack emotional intelligence. There's very little, if any, sense of spiritual understanding and awareness. And maybe it manifests into your body, right? Having a weak, brittle body that is not capable of recovering from setback or trauma or challenge. But that's what I mean by defining weak. I just want to make sure that's clear. And then there's, alpha, strong, men who are perceived to be strong externally, but also strong internally. How you measure internal strength when you're watching videos, it's hard to determine that. So for all intents and purposes, let's say allegedly, these people are internally strong. Let's remove this whole thing for a second, because the answer is not outside of you. We are designed to look outwardly for role models. And I think there at some point you should look to see if that is someone that you can connect with. But the first question that needs to be asked is, what are your values? What's important to you? How do you want to live your life? Are you a person who values integrity? Are you someone who values courage? Are you someone who values intellect? Are you someone who values honesty, love, connection, brotherhood, masculinity, virtue, justice, gratitude, humanity, right? I'm just throwing a lot of words out there, but these represent values that people need to understand if they like, if it aligns with them. And then you can start to look out and see, are there people who carry that similar value archetype? And are they people who actually uphold those things both inside and what you see on the inside, based on what they're letting you see? And that could be a good barometer for you to follow. But this idea of kind of looking outside of ourselves first is the first step that immediately makes you lose yourself. And when you lose yourself, that's when many things happen, including feeling like you don't have choice. You lose your sense of self through an ability to feel like you're free, because you're taking your identity and you're giving it into something else or someone else. And that could also lead to levels of depression and potentially mental illness. Studies have shown this. When you lose a sense of self over time, you can drop into a deep depression or a form of mental illness. And so when we see a lot of men struggling mentally, emotionally, it wouldn't be a surprise to me if there was actual focus, groups and studies done, that a big part of it is because they don't know who they are. And they're trying to emulate a world that is trying to make them feel like if you are this type of person, then you can live the life that you want. And I personally have played this game in my first, half of my life. And I thought
Yeah.
I was winning. And it wasn't until later on that I realized that I was playing someone else's game and they were winning.
Yeah.
And I was going to end up
Yeah.
losing at the end of the day. And I
Yeah.
didn't want to play that game anymore. So you got to decide, just to kind of wrap it up, you got to decide what's important to you, how you want to live your life, what game of life you want to play, and see if there's other
Yeah.
people out there who are playing that same game and are winning, and how you can emulate that.
That's awesome. Yeah, I love that. That's a great perspective, because I think I'm always interested in what goes on deep within our minds. I've always been a problem solver of I love things where we can say, where's that moment in us where some type of switch can flip and we go from weakness to power.
Mm-hmm.
And this concept is, I think my message to anyone watching would be, it's like, you're going to be figuring this out your entire life. There isn't a finish line. There isn't a finish line. You're not going to arrive by this age, when I have this much money or whatever, that I've fully stepped into who I really am and understand. Life just doesn't work that way. So there's one thing to remove, is any belief around that there is a finish line. So the beauty in that is that means that no matter where you're at, there's value in where you're at, and accepting where you're at is where you are where you are supposed to be. And the importance of that is by accepting where you're at. Like, if I am driving down the road and my gasoline light comes on my car, and I know I got 30 miles before I potentially run out of gas, and I still have 200 miles in front of me to get to my destination, it's pretty important that I accept the reality of that situation. So accepting the reality of that situation without getting upset about it, it might be inconvenient. I don't want to stop. Maybe I'm going to be late because I didn't account for this. It didn't work out the way that I was originally planning when I was like mapping my trip. Maybe I feel like there's some big consequence if I don't get there. This is going to cost me or whatever. But the truth is, it doesn't matter. The reality of it is you got 30 miles left in that gas tank. And if you don't stop and figure it out right now, you're not going to get there at all. So that's like the strength to just accept what is and realize that you have the capacity to adapt to the situation. And that's where that faith comes in. And you pull over and you fill the gas tank up, and you realize I could make a call and let the person know. And then you learn a lesson about communication, that maybe that, whatever it is, you just realize that, it was a setback, but yet in this setback, it gave me an opportunity to, to realize that I could have the capacity to adapt to this. And that's the thing that ends up increasing your sense of confidence in yourself, is that, hey, no matter what happens, I can trust life ultimately.
It's so powerful what you said there, because we're talking about the last thing you talked about was resilience. Being able to take a perceived setback and to overcome it. Like, that is resilient. I think it's a core element of developing internal strength. That's why when I work with my clients, I don't talk about wellness. Wellness is a feeling. And while that's important, that's not something that you want to necessarily aspire to. Like, if you're aspiring towards your feelings, you will be let down, because feelings, like anything else, are temporary. However, something that you can really take more responsibility and control over, for the most part, is your fitness. And I define fitness based on your ability to recover from setback, trauma, and challenge. So being physically fit, being mentally fit, being spiritually fit is something that are things that are so important. And so when you become resilient, you become more fit. And when you're fit, I have found, and my clients have found, the more fit you are, the better wellness you have, and the more well you feel as a result of it. It's because you feel well doesn't mean that you're fit. And that's the disclaimer there, and so I love that. I love the importance of self-acceptance.
Mm-hmm.
We we can tend to be self-loathing as men. We can tend to just blame ourselves for
Comparison.
Our circumstances. And there's
Yeah.
truth to it. Like you are, there is a level of responsibility for where you are in your life right now.
Yep.
And it's not completely your fault that you may not have been equipped or exposed to the tools and the skill sets and the knowledge and the experience necessary to be better than where you are right now. But if you can accept where you are right now, then it opens the door for you now to take responsibility for where you want to go. And with that responsibility comes that internal power to do something about it and no longer play victim. People, when we talk about weakness, and doesn't matter if you're a man or woman or anything in between. When I talk about weakness, I talk about when you allow yourself to be helpless and hopeless. That right there is the intersection of apathy. But when you're playing the victim and you're choosing not to do something about it, like, then you become a victim of your circumstance. You are powerless, right? That's the reason why it's called powerless, because you have no strength. You're weak, over the conditions of your life. But that's a choice that you make. That's not something that is imposed upon you. Not every single time. I don't want to overgeneralize.
Yep.
But for the most part, we have the capacity to change our conditions. We get to change our environment. We get to change how we feel. No one gets to force that upon us, And once we accept that and we take responsibility for that, it gives us a really good chance to actually change our lives. So I really enjoyed what you said there, because that's a great example of what it means to accept where you're at and then be able to make decisions that's going to further you towards the outcome that you want.
Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes I like to think, like, what would I say to myself if I went back, to my self, go back in time and talk to myself and I was like, 21 or, just entering the whole world in that way. What advice might I give to myself? And I think it's important. I would want myself to know, and any guy to know, that there's two sides of winning. There's accountability and there's forgiveness, letting go. So it's accepting what is like, you're stepping into the obstacle race and you're committed to it. And you should pick things in life. This is an important thing for confidence too, is you should ask yourself, what excites me? Like, I love what you said about knowing what your values are. I think that's something that those are questions that people aren't asking themselves, is like, what do I value? And when you're younger, you are looking, you do borrow those things, and there is value in having role models and stuff, and that is an issue. So, but it's important to say, what do I value? And you'll find ultimately that values don't come down of like external things. They might, those might be representative of your values, but you can't actually value something that isn't, in my opinion, that isn't actually eternal or a true principle. So you're going to value your freedom, for example. You're going to value maybe artistic expression, or you're going to value connection, or, think that if you start general like that, it creates a sense of like if there is a feeling component to that, right? That's not a reaction though. That's a intentional, say like, that's an expanded feeling of like those, wouldn't it be nice if, and then those things will show up in your mind as potential, like maybe that's a business I'm going to do, or, I want to go talk to girls, or whatever your mind will fill in the blanks. All right, with things that you can do in life that are going to match those values. And those things will always change, but your values likely will only expand, or you'll hold on to them and they'll expand, Yeah. But I would have wanted myself to know a little bit deeper into that, into why am I really doing what I'm doing? Because that helps you make choices in career path, what you value in relationships. And then I would want myself to know also that the feelings of fear is nothing to judge yourself over, that you're going to have that. Don't beat yourself up. Don't think that because you're not where the other person is or whatever, or don't let the distance from a goal be your reason for thinking that something is wrong with you. Don't perceive that as a problem. Let that, accept it for what it is, and accept the challenge of it, and then have that compassion for yourself that you're a human being. This is just your story. This is you're the hero in this journey, and you're having your experience, and it's okay to be where you're at. And it doesn't matter if and if you think that someone else has all these hookups, wherever they may have strengths that shine, but everyone has a shadow. Everyone has an area in their life where they're still like 3 or 4 years old and they haven't grown up yet, or they're like slowly growing up, And if you don't think so, just wait until you meet your heroes. Wait until you meet your mentors, whatever, and you'll see that they're going to have areas where they still struggle. We all kind of carry around these. And once you kind of realize that kind of, I think that's an important thing amongst men too, is to realize that like we all give a fuck about bringing beauty into the world. We give a fuck about our lives, and we all have challenges, and just admitting that to each other instead of playing the comparison. That does a lot to help you realize like, oh, those have been the moments where I'm like, oh, you give yourself permission to forgive yourself and kind of dive into that challenge and have some fun with it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so interesting, right? Like this conversation feels so freeing to me. And I also find that in today's world, that's polarizing, right? To make a conscious choice of wanting to be not necessarily your own person. We all are our own person, but to really not only have values, but to live by them, to embody them, to enforce them, right? And that seems to be very polarizing today. But what you're talking about is understanding that if you're playing a game of life, you are the main character, and you are equipped naturally with fundamental skill sets, experiences, knowledge, and some special powers that can allow you to win the game. Super Mario Brothers was a very simple game, but it had a very epic story, right? Like Big Bad Koopa took the princess from her castle, and little ass Mario had to figure out how he was going to beat the next 8 levels and all of Koopa's henchmen to then face a fire-breathing monster and cross the bridge to then potentially, save Princess Peach. Like, that is the story of our lives, and we get to I think the magic about all of this is we don't have to choose our character. We already have one. It's us. And if we spend more time becoming self-aware of who we are, what we stand for, and how we want to express that in the world and the impact we want to have, I think there'll be so many more role models that we get to choose from in today's world, just by simply seeing it from that perspective, because the game will take care of itself. There's going to be challenges. There's going to be pitfalls. There's going to be times where you fall in the pit or you get attacked and you got to repeat the level over again. But the beauty of any game is you get to play again. And when you get to play again this time, now you have feedback on how you can overcome that challenge.
You're going to remember that. You're going to remember that block you slipped off of trying to jump across. You're like, that one block, I keep slipping off of it. And you're going to be so focused on that. You're going to do that level again. And you're going to be like, until you get it.
And the reason why we do it is because it's so fun. The game is fun. And when we overcome, right, when we don't slip off the block, that feeling that we have, that is what fulfillment is. That's that simple feeling of, wow, I just figured it out. I just grew, right? Yeah. Now, granted, it's a simulated experience of playing a game, but that exists in this real game called life. We can have this feeling of fulfillment that we can grow, and that grow can have an impact, not just on ourselves, but on other people. And That's why I love using game design, because when guys can wrap their heads around it, most guys love games. It doesn't have to be a video game. It could be any game. Scrabble, Sudoku, crossword puzzles, word search, card games. Doesn't matter. If there's a structure in which you can use that's going to teach you not only how to play the game, but how to win the game and how you can get better at winning the game, it's a game worth playing. And you're going to grow. You're going to enjoy the process. And the winning becomes a byproduct at the end of the day. It doesn't become that all of a sudden now the focus of your entire life. You'll look back in your life and you're not going to think about what you've accomplished. You're going to be thinking about how you felt in these special moments in your life that felt really fulfilling. And I can't say that I know this because I'm still living, but the people I've talked to who are on the latter stages of their lives, that's all they focus on. The feeling of fulfillment. And whatever that is wherever that comes from, which, by the way, and here comes from their values. You live and you die by your values.
I'm going to validate what you just said about the end of life with a really quick story. I was in the San Diego airport on a way to do some filming, and our plane needed some maintenance. So I had to spend an extra hour happily, because I'm like, whatever maintenance it needs, do it. But an elderly gentleman sat down next to me, and he was he was right around 80. And he was just coming from Mexico, and he had just found out he had pancreatic cancer. And he's like, yeah, they said I got cancer. I don't know. I don't even believe him, And he had this, like, he started telling me these stories of his, like, he knew Emmett Smith. He showed me photos. He went to jail at one point, not just because he had this, like, rebellious spirit. He was not that this is what makes the man, but I thought it was funny. And he's 80 and his girlfriend was 50. It was just funny, right? Yeah. But he was salty and charismatic, and he was facing something that a lot of people think a big challenge, but it just didn't, like, faze him. And it was amazing. That in itself was, like, amazing, And he told me, he's like, look, just you live your life, like, live the life you want to live. It says, I don't regret anything in my life. Like, I have lived such a full life. That's why I'm not afraid of death. I'm like, dude, when you got a 80-year-old dude with cancer telling you that, and he's living it, that's different than, you and I are saying it. And, like, it's powerful. That struck me quite deeply and gave me a lot I feel like that was, like, my future self in a way talking to me, saying, hey, quit worrying about this or that, just, like, take the action and do the thing. Back to your gaming, just to continue, because I like the gaming frame. So I would love to hear your insights, being that you've coached so many men on this and done this. You've been in their minds. What myths about the game? What are the most common myths that men tell themselves about the game that make them play it wrong? What are the most common things, the self-limiting myths that they have adopted or believe that get in their way?
It's a great question. I would say the first thing is they think they're winning the game, but they don't even know what game they're playing. Right? Like, that's the level of self-awareness they have. And I was one of those people, right? I thought I was winning the game. And
can you give me an example? Like, what do you mean? What do you mean by, like, I got the money, I got the car, I'm good?
I mean, I'll share my personal example. When the Professional Wingman took off, we'll say things took off very early on. I just expected that I would have to hustle and struggle, and that was kind of my life. That was kind of passed on to me, by my parents and my grandparents. The Professional Wingman didn't happen that way. I worked hard, but the success came really fast. And I thought I was ready, because I thought that that's what I was supposed to do. I thought I was supposed to be this cool, charismatic guy. Nothing phases me. Lady killer, goes out there and just goes to work, like a man about town, all these things. I'm the wingman. And this identity that I embodied, I owned it, because I thought that's what I needed to be validated, loved, praised, acknowledged, to be successful. And damn it, I drove it off the cliff, but I drove it hard. And, around 2014, I just got married, love of my life. That, our marriage was featured in the New York Times, had a video that, caught almost 250,000 views. I mean, we were, our People magazine broke our wedding. That was breaking news. I mean,
Wow.
I was making six figures at that time, easy. I was living in New York. I was being asked to show up on talk shows, and I was flown out around the country. Clients were flying me out around the country to work with them. So I got to explore new cities and essentially take them over using my social skills, And I remember I had just crushed the Steve Harvey show, absolutely crushed it. Even Steve was impressed. And I remember celebrating at a rooftop bar in Chicago. And, I'm surrounded by people who I knew, who just wanted to come and celebrate with me. But I was also surrounded by people who didn't know me. And I could tell, if they were women, they wanted to be with me. If they were guys, they wanted to be me. I felt that. And I knew that about myself, and that awareness everywhere I went. I mean, even in New York, it was kind of hard to go to certain places because I just became kind of known, So I had to kind of shift even how I was operating with my clients because of that. And I remember just kind of sitting back and like assessing everything. And I was like, man, I did it. Like, I have the money.
I made it.
I got the girl, right? I got the fame, right? I have a little bit of celebrity. I'm just balling, And I'm reaching over to grab another drink at the table that the bar had given me as like a congratulations for my segment. And I remember seeing the reflection in the glass window, a glass tabletop. And it was almost as if the reflection talked to me. And it was like, bro, you pulled it off. Like, what? So what now? Almost as if like, we were able to maintain the cover, right? Like, you pulled it off. You pulled off the greatest heist because no one knows who you really are. So what now? Right? Like, how are you going to keep this up?
Yeah.
And I had no answer for that. I didn't expect to even be asked that question. And I was just overwhelmed in my body. I was freaking out. It almost felt like I was about to have a panic attack, but just to save face being in a public space, I just like chugged my drink. And I didn't realize, but like I just created a coping mechanism right there because that extreme feeling plus just the instant relief just created that habit. So then I fell into a drinking problem, turned into a drug problem, but it was all based around this inability to take this persona of the wingman and separate it from myself, who was a very different person. And I basically negated the real version of me and I pedestalized my persona. And it all came to head when I became a dad. Because then the true identity for me died. And I end up actively mourning the death of that identity. Because I was thinking, like, how am I going to be a dad and be a wingman? Like, how am I going to be able to am I going to walk around with like an ergo baby and try to pick up girls? Like, how is this going to look, And I
probably work better, to tell you the truth.
Probably. But I just kept drinking myself away, and it was a big struggle. And so, what I came to when I eventually got sober, which was over 5 years ago, I then realized that the life that I created was based on who I thought I needed to be in order to be loved, validated, praised, accepted in life. And even when I achieved those numbers and those stats, so to speak, the thing that I did not realize was that I did not accept, validate, praise, and love myself. And that was the beginning of the descent. So I decided to play a different game, where the game was based on who I knew I was and how I wanted to express myself, and play a different game where it was based on who I knew I was meant to be, not based on someone else's vision or based on someone else's, my need for their validation. And so that's when the inward game starts, the inner game, right? That you might have, people may have heard. And that has leveled up my life significantly. So, this idea that, sometimes we don't even know that we're not playing the game that we're supposed to be playing because we've been taught to play the game a certain way.
I would say my my when you tell that story, which it was awesome, I can very much relate to a lot of that. What came to my mind was like, but that's actually okay too, because at the time you were following your excitement. Becoming a wingman, there was something about that. So it's important. Like if we can't, again, this is where the ego could fall into a trap of comparing themselves. Oh, I need to not do what excites me now. I need to find that my true self before I take action or whatever. It's like, well, again, even that is you're not going to arrive at a destination. It's really a simple question: what excites you? And I think what was happening for you is you were like a snake shedding its skin. We step into the ego is not a bad thing.
No,
the mask is not a bad thing. It's just like they come off, and then you learn something in that journey, and it was time to integrate it. And then there was a part of you that was resisting that, so you were coping with the drinking and all that kind of stuff, right?
Yeah.
And then now you're looking back, and I guarantee you right now, you wouldn't change anything.
No.
Yeah.
Because it's the same skills and experiences that I had back then that allows me to be here and feel very comfortable having these conversations.
Yeah.
Right. It's the same skill sets I learned that allows me to create even more transformation and help with, even more successful men, because they're the ones that are experiencing the things that I went through, so I wouldn't change anything. Even the drinking and the drugging part, I wouldn't change that, because those things led me to so much more. It led me to deeper sense of spirituality, a deeper sense of awakening, a greater sense of purpose of what kind of impact I want to make. And even around that, like, I do believe that God, gave that to me and allowed that life to unfold in that way for me, so I can make it out the other side and be able to share with others that it's possible for them to do the same. There's no other reason that I can explain it, because I should be dead based on how much I consume, right? And the situations that I put myself in, but I'm not. And I didn't do anything about that. I think God, who I consider my higher power, put me through that path so I can be here to share that story. So, to even opt to change any of that would actually be terrible for me, because there'd be certain things about me today that I wouldn't have. And so, and just to give you another example, I had a very, very deep awakening about a couple of weeks ago, where I had an opportunity to heal my 19-year-old self, and not realizing that there was significant trauma that I experienced back then that I just suppressed. And when that opened up, my body just went crazy, like migraine, headaches, just like total detox. It was great. It was very surreal. And what ended up, we talked about letting go, right? Like, I had to, finally let go of that trauma. And I was able to do that through some journaling. And what it ended up coming down to was this idea of, I forgave that 19-year-old that did what he had to do to survive, because he knew no other way. He didn't do anything wrong. But I also said thank you, because he gave me a gift that I get to still use today, which is how to reinvent himself. At 19, he had to figure out how to reinvent himself. Now, did he do it the way that I would do it now? No. He did it the only way he knew how. There was only one game he knew how to play, which was the validation game. But he still was able to reinvent himself in a way that bettered his life. But I still get to take that gift of the ability to do that with the wisdom that I have today. And that's such a powerful combination. And being able to heal that and to let that go is a great example of what you're talking about in terms of shedding the skin, right? It's just a perpetual process that we experience in life. It's amazing.
Yeah. Well, we go through stages too. I think, there's like a pendulum that swings between our like fiery, I don't want to do all this. What's all this healing talk? I got shit to do. I want to get it done. That's like your fire. It's like, and that's good, man. If you're in that, like, do it. But just know that there will come a point where that pendulum can't swing that way any further without it becoming so stressful for you that what you have to learn how to do is let it swing the other way, which is into letting go and change and acceptance. And there's things that are going to change, and it's going to feel more like, it can be very unsettling to maybe sit back and do nothing for a moment. and let more clarity come. This is like the pendulum swings the other way. And then, and even that can go to a point where it needs to then come back the other direction,
Yep.
And then I think as you get older, those swings, ideally, as you get more wisdom, those swings become less, they become more mild instead of big. When you're young, they're like really big swings. Hard, go, 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 burn yourself out. Older, you learn to use your energy a little bit more wisely, but the same principles still apply. All back to the some of the myths that we tell ourselves, about the game, particularly whenever your character needs to face a challenge. Some of the modern stories, and I'd be curious to hear what the ones you hear are, but like I could think of things like, it's still one of them is like, I don't make enough money. Mm-hmm. Like I see so much emotional energy around money, which is, we really relate to we really, like, women know their waist size and are self-conscious about it. And this is I'm being very heteronormative, generalizing, bell curve here, guys. So, but they're gonna see, they understand as a part of them that understand, like, how physically beauty I'm perceived that's a reality. It does have an impact on how, the opportunities I get. Men can feel the same way about their wealth or their money. So just to unravel that one, because that's a big one. And if you could what's your perspective on that? And how do you take if a guy is, like, say, in a position where he isn't financially where he wants to be, that doesn't destroy his confidence?
Yeah. So, the idea of not having enough is still tied to the fear of not being enough, right? And when you're not feeling like you're being enough, then you don't feel like you're lovable or worthy of love, right? Both men and women go through this. And whatever a woman's currency value is, their currency is there's something that on the guy side, right? So for women, especially when they're younger in today's world, it's their looks, it's their vitality. That is their currency. For men, it's achievement and money and maybe physical fitness of some kind, right? So either way, there's this game that's being played. And I think the myth is derived from what I don't know. I don't have a name for the formula, but it's a messed up formula, which is have plus do equals be, right? And so when I have X amount of money, then I'll be able to do, or get the girl, and then I'll be happy, right? And it's this when I, and not knowing that our mind is designed to push the boundaries of when we get close. So if, let's say, the goal is to get 100K salary, for example, the moment you get close to 100K salary, your mind will naturally want to push that anywhere from 4 to 10%. Naturally. Because if you can get there, that means you can get elsewhere. And your mind doesn't want to be present to the fact that you worked so hard to get to 100K. That your mind wants to skip that and then go to the next milestone. This happens when we watch TV. When we watch TV, there are studies that have shown that the more we watch TV, we tend to spend 4% more just because we want to keep up with the Joneses. There's studies that are going to be continuing to come out that's going to talk about the more we scroll on social media, the lower our self-esteem, right? It's hard to measure self-esteem, but at some point we'll be able to connect it in a very scientific way. Those studies are still being done, but we can visually see that it impacts people's self-esteem. So this idea of comparison and when and if and I wish I could, or, if they did and I did, all these conditionals, hypotheticals is what keeps us away from our own version of happiness. I use air quotes because I've now also understood that happiness is not as important as it is to be fulfilled. I think fulfillment creates happiness. But so how do you shift it? Well, my philosophy around it, I've seen people flip the formula is basically be plus do equals have, meaning, if you want to be confident, then you need to do things that confident people do, and then you'll have whatever that produces. that's really hard for some people because that means that they're not they can't really attach to the have. What they may want may not be what they get. Right? It doesn't always look. The how doesn't always guarantee the what.
Well, I think it kind of like it's the feeling of not having enough money, and I've certainly absolutely been there, and I've had, this is what felt, COVID and all that, swept some businesses out from under me and having to rebuild now, and I'm not where I want to be in this very moment. There's more to be had, and I think when you're below a certain threshold where you feel like I literally can prove I don't have enough to, say, pay rent or do the things, whatever, that's when it really takes some inner strength, like a motherfucker, right? Some inner strength, because it's the feeling of being in a room with not enough oxygen. And it's like someone coming in saying, you just have to you don't need oxygen to be happy. It's like you need to be fulfilled, and then the oxygen will come. You're like, I'm too lightheaded to even hear your advice right now. That's what it can feel like. It'd be very, very powerful. So I think there's I think that has to be acknowledged, but it's not, but even in that, it's like, what helped me with money was breaking down what it actually is.
Yeah.
Because we think money is currency, but currency is an imaginary unit of exchange that represents this idea of money, which gets to what money is. It's an idea. Well, the necessity of money is value exchange. And the idea that if I exchange value, or that I need things and other people need things, and the question is, do I have things that others value?
Yeah.
And which is, again, a reason to know your values. Because if you know your values, you also start to establish your worth. And a lot of times your money problems get solved with understanding what are my core values. Because I think one of the mistakes that a lot of guys get into is, if you're chasing the idea of money at the expense of your values, you may get the money, but it comes at a price.
Yeah.
Which is funny, which is paradoxical. Whereas if you know what your values are, it's actually easier to make the money. Just like when you told your story of starting the wingman thing, what I heard in that story was that this was something that you saw and recognized you had an aptitude for. It was fun and it created excitement for you, in which resulted in you enjoying it, getting better results for people. And I know, without even asking, what happened is people started referring people to you because they were so wowed by the value that you were able to bring into their life. And I think the world has sold us on putting ourselves in situations today where our strengths aren't actually being played to. And that what's happening is we're working at jobs and things where people aren't seeing our value and recognizing it. And the lesson for men is to realize that it's your responsibility to know your value, to make it shine and bring it to the world in creative ways, whether that's through a business or choosing a different career where those can be validated. And when you play to your strengths, then it's going to be, you get this true idea of wealth where you can exchange your value. You're able to offer real value in a situation. You're going to grow much faster. You're going to actually feel fulfilled in doing that. And the money comes, currency comes as a reflection of the value that's being exchanged. And that's a very nuanced way of looking at it, but that needs to be broken down, in my opinion, to look at that way, because it comes back to your original problem that you said that most men are, is they're not asking themselves, what is it I value and what is my value in the world? Aptitudes, strengths, what are your gifts? What are you naturally good at? What are you inclined to? What are you interested in? And if you're stuck at a job thinking, I don't have enough money to go do the things I want, there is some truth in that. So I want to acknowledge that. Like it can take some money investment, but that faith component also is something they may not be seeing, because if you just start taking little 1% actions in the direction of that excitement, you'll notice that the world will start to work with you.
Yeah.
And I think that's an experience that's what I'm kind of reading between the lines that you help men do, is start to see that the world will be on your side when you start showing up for yourself.
Absolutely. And I love that you said 1%. I have a 1%. One of my core values is 1% every day, because there's magic in compound effort. So with that enthusiasm, right, and the consistency and using your strengths, you create this you can become unrecognizable in a year. And I use simple math to prove this, right? Like, 1 to the power of 365 is 1, right? Anything to the power of 1 is anything like that is going to always be 1. But if you just make 1.01 to the power of 365, I think it makes like 37. So in theory, you could become 37 times better than you were if you started, a year ago. Now, it doesn't mean that that's, we got to lock in on that number, but there's magic in compound effort, right? Like you can get to a place where you become completely unrecognizable than who you were years ago. I've experienced this. My wife tells me on a regular basis that she just can't believe the transformation I've made over the past 5 years. And sometimes she'll say it within the past year because I'm constantly doing things from a 1% incremental pace because I know that makes a difference, right? We see it with money and we talk about money.
Yeah.
There's a reason why they use water terms in terms of money, right? Currency, cash flow, exchange, trade. It's about energy, right? And when I work with my clients, there's 4 worlds where we play in that I think impact everyone's lives. When I work with my guys, it's in the world of purpose, play, passion, and performance. And performance is governed by the value that you increase, share, and ask. So whatever that value is, if you're willing to increase it, if you see yourself as an asset to the world, and then you share that value with other people, it then becomes a lot easier for you to ask for value and then be able to receive value in return, whatever that may be. It could be money, but it could be support. It could be resource, supplies. It could be mentorship. It could be an introduction. It could be access, a network, whatever it might be, right? Love, a laugh, a listen, someone to hold space, right? Like all these things are value and it's all based on what you value, right? It's because the things that you value hold a higher level of worth in comparison to other things. But to your point, right? Like there are realities that we also need to acknowledge, which goes back to what you were talking about before, right? Like accepting them and then taking personal responsibility to do something different. So, when I bring back the formula, the modified formula of be plus do equals have, I actually didn't think that was good enough. And so I changed it to be times do equals have. Because it's not enough to just do. You need to do repeatedly. You need to do consistently. In order to have whatever it is you end up having because of that incremental growth path, And one of my great friends told me this actually this past weekend. He said, in regards to economic insecurities, a lot of people have fear of that. The antidote, as he liked to call it, is 2 things. One is a willingness to work. And I think there's a lot of guys out there who do have a willingness to work. You may need to humble yourself and work and do things that you may not want to do right now. But if it supports your dream ahead and you have the willingness to do it, then you will not have the fear of economic insecurity. But he said the second thing, which is really important, is flexibility in lifestyle. If you have the ability to change your environment to be more sustainable for your growth path, then once again, it's a level of acceptance and humility that you have to undertake to create that situation.
Yeah.
And that's where, when I talk about keeping up with the Joneses and spending money and things like that, that's where the conflict can come in. Because if you are definitely dedicated to your dream, whatever that dream is, then there are trade-offs. I don't like to call them sacrifices because you can always get things back, but it does come at a trade. You trade one thing for another. So if you value certain things, then you're trading off other things. If you're willing to trade those things in support of your dream, then go for it. But you're the only one that's holding you back. And the thing that I think is holding most people back is the fear of not being good enough, the fear of what if I fail? The fear of, will I be loved by making these trade-offs?
Yeah. And I think that's great. I think, I've been reading, again, the 48 Laws of Power, really great book to understand the darker aspects of humanity and how we behave whenever we are faced with scarcity, and it's it describes like, it's really great. It gives stories of Napoleon and all. It's really great, and never outshine the master, a lot of stuff like that. But
Mhm.
the point in that is also understanding that there's a deeper game that's going on. That's a part of us we have to accept, is like, you're going to have these desires to compete and this kind of stuff. And when they come up, so a lot of times we don't want to admit that to ourselves. Our ego doesn't want to admit that we're comparing, but just realize that it's just a natural thing that's going to come up. And if you just let it see, like, well, what's it really saying? Like, what we're really talking about is flipping into an abundance mindset versus a scarcity mindset. Okay.
Yeah.
That's really the flip. And I think what I'm trying to say is, just the guys out there realize is that the world teaches you a scarcity mindset. The world, for thousands of years, we have it in our DNA, we have it in our bones, that it isn't safe to go for our dreams because we're only going to get shot down.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so we end up playing these games of survival, and we live in a world now where there's an opportunity to actually thrive, and making a decision to have an abundance mindset can feel a little unsettling. It can feel scary because it feels like you're having to let go of that part of you that's trying to survive. And it's really, that's why it's important to integrate that part of you and to bring acceptance to that, because there's a higher level game that can be played. There's enough to go around. The best entrepreneurs, I have the just like real world, my mentor, Mike Koenigs, is, he's worked with the Wolf of Wall Street. He's friends with Tony Robbins. He's spoken on the stages at MIT. He's an amazing entrepreneur that is a titan behind a lot of the titans. And he is humble, and he's a loving person. He is imperfect, but he is highly adaptable, and he's a creative visionary type. But he has an incredible abundance mindset and surrounds himself with other like-minded entrepreneurs that believe that there are solutions, and we can create solutions to our problems in our life and in the world. And they aim their minds towards that. And lo and behold, when you collaborate together, this is where you create innovation in your life, where you get these next levels. So it really is about having the discipline and the faith, to bring up that word you used earlier. And it is faith, like Indiana Jones stepping off the cliff and hoping that his foot's going to land on that invisible rail there. It can literally feel that way, to take the action you need to take in the direction of where you feel some excitement or inspiration. We've been so trained to suspend our vision and align with the vision of others in order to not upset the king, to play it safe. It's to just know that, like, that's a real thing that we all struggle with as humans. And don't make yourself feel special because you have those feelings come up. You are not unique. You're not unique in that. That's just a real important message I want to share.
Yeah. It's a great message, man. Yeah. And I totally agree. You get to choose how you want to play this, man. And I believe everyone here is fully equipped to live the life that they want. The only thing that gets in their way is their belief in themselves and the fear behind it. And here's the truth. The fear is not going to completely go away. You're always going to live your life with some sense of
fear. You don't
fear.
Want it to.
Yeah. It's designed to give you a gauge of where growth opportunities lie.
It's your edge.
Exactly. And when the fear comes and you have eventually a system in place mentally and emotionally and even physically to move through that fear doesn't stay around as long. It goes back in the corner and tries to come up with another fear to try to catch you. But in the meantime, it allows you to go off and live the life that you are meant to live. So don't think of this as this idea that I need to live this fearless life, because that actually is a lie. It does not exist. Maybe for some people, they chemically can't feel fear, but I'm not talking about those people, right? I'm talking to the person who understands fear. And if you embrace it and you process it and you just acknowledge that means there's a growth opportunity that exists on the other side, maybe even through fear, you're going to live a life beyond your wildest dreams. And that is not that's not hyperbolic. Like, that is a promise, because I've seen it happen with thousands of men who just chose, even as something as simple as walking up and talking to the most attractive person at the bar, like that is them stepping through the threshold of what's possible in their lives. You know,
you already won.
So yeah, exactly. Right. So it doesn't have to be this big thing, right? It starts small. So just, face it. It won't stick around as long as you think it will.
Yeah. I'll inject one last thing, and then I want to ask a couple questions about your coaching, your programs, and how people can work with you. It's one of the biggest revelations to me that shows the importance of not comparing yourself to other men and all that. It's like, yes, we're going to have desires for money and wealth and this kind of stuff, but we're doing that for us. You're doing that for yourself. It's more about logistics. It's more about there can be excitement around it versus all the stress. But when it comes to women, this is in honesty what my experience has been. And I've dated very beautiful women, I inside and out. Okay, not perfect, but beautiful women inside and out. And I have always found that the thing that made me attractive to them was not me trying to be attractive, but me being authentic, especially about where my own vulnerabilities, about the parts of me that this is the area where I'm still growing. And there's such a relief in being able to say that women have this thing in them, in their heart of hearts. And I get that there's women have their problems in shadow too. And they may not, this is if you want to know whether a woman is a good woman in your life, tell her your absolute truth. Not your oh, I'm afraid to do this and I can't do it, I need your help. That's asking for a mother. Okay.
Yeah.
But you're stepping in, this is an area where I'm working on in my life, where I know that I need improvement, where you take ownership of it, or you're just being authentic about, I got a little you could, even if let's say you don't have any money, as soon as you have a vision, as soon as you've define your values and have a vision and you've created a mission for yourself, share your mission with women and watch what happens. They will become your biggest cheerleaders, and they will see that quality of you. They're not looking like, well, are you there yet? Well, come talk to me. A guy'd be like, well, come talk to me when you got the results. Women aren't that way. They're not like, well, come talk to me when you got the money. In their heart of hearts, they are attracted to and feel safe around a man that has a vision and mission. And in fact, what a lot of men don't realize is that women would love to play a role in that vision. They would love to dance with you. If you've got it all figured out and you're done and you think you've crossed some finish line, then you are essentially boxing people out. You can box her out and not playing a role. They love to cheerlead vision, and you'll find yourself being able to do that with her as well in her own ways. You're going to want her to follow her heart, and she want you to follow your heart. But you're not going to meet those kind of women if you're not leading with that kind of energy. If you're leading with the oh, look how much money I have and whatever, you're going to get a girl who's going to be looking for the handout and not be able to be trusted. She's in her shadow as well. So this is really important stuff. This is not just about getting the pretty girl. This is actually about, if you want healthy relationships, showing up in this way where you're just you own where you're at, you have a mission, and you ain't comparing where you're at versus someone else. That energy right there is what's going to attract the right friends, business partners, women, and opportunities into your life. I can't stress enough how important that is. And I love that you're aligned with that, man. I love that you teach. I know you'd be teaching that to them dudes.
Yeah, man. I mean, what you're talking about is what I call authentic polarization, where you're so true to yourself, your vision, your mission, that it invokes a polarizing response. And what guys need to understand is that is what you want. You want a polarizing response. That polarity serves as a filter for who gets to be in your life and who should not be in your life, right? Across so many areas of life. And you want there to be a reaction around what you stand for. This is why it always goes back to values. Because when you are communicating, you're expressing those values, There's going to be some people who they don't want any part of you, and they're going to exit stage left. And that's good. You don't want those people in your life because they may try to make you change your values or tell you that you're wrong, or they may, find a way to knock you down because they don't feel that empowered to express themselves the way that you're choosing to. And that's intimidating for them. So those are the other people. Then there's going to be people who are absolutely obsessed with you because they are in alignment with your vision. They love your vision. They want to be a part of your vision. They want to help you move forward. Imagine what it would be like to have a woman like that in your life. Imagine what it would be like to have a group of dudes who got your back and they want to participate in the curation of that vision, to have mentors in your life that do that. That is what authentic polarization does. And when you embody that, that's how you change your game, because you're going to then attract the people that you specifically want and maybe even need in your life to win the game that you set out to play.
Very good. So before we close out here, you have the professionalwingman.com. Is that your website?
Yes.
Yeah. Is it the Professional Wingman?
Yeah, theprofessionalwingman.com.
Okay. Very cool. I'll put a link right here to that so you guys can check it out. So tell me, if I was a guy and I want to win at the game of life and get some help, like getting my mindset right, maybe I'm struggling with motivation or I'm feeling some of these things, which is okay. Like, don't beat yourself up for that. Just get humility leads to growth. Admit it to yourself, accept it, and get some help. What does that look like? What would be the best way? Like, what would be the perfect step one with you that would help me get started on that path? And what would that entail for me?
Yeah. That first part you said is desiring help. I want to stress, I can't stress enough how important it is for you to know that it's not bad. It's not a sign of weakness that you are looking for support. This game is not meant to be a one-player solo game. This game is meant to be a co-op. It's meant to be a multiplayer experience where there's people who come along your path and support you in your dreams. What you can do by yourself can be accelerated by up to 37 times, having a group of people around you on the same mission. So desiring help is actually a source of strength. I think people who go it alone are the ones who actually end up, I'll just say it, the weakest, because they don't have people around them to empower them. So that's the first thing. So once you realize that's cool and you want to come in and work together, there's different ways we can do it. I love working with people one-on-one. Typically the people I work with one-on-one, they've had coaching before, so they understand the value and they're looking to take their purpose, their impact, and their legacy to the next level. They want to play life by their own rules and they want to enjoy the process of where it takes to get there. And so if you want that, best place for you to go to is theprofessionalwingman.com/apply. Now, there's many people who I talk to on podcasts, they've never had coaching before. So in the coaching world, it can be really intimidating to know who's right, who's wrong, and who's actually in it for the right reasons. I'm not here to convince you. If you listen to this podcast and you believe I'm one of those guys, then great. And if you're new to coaching, I'm actually going to be launching a group program that's going to allow you to experience what it's like to be coached, but also have the experience of support of other men who are striving to be better too. I haven't launched that yet. And so the best thing you can do is go to theprofessionalwingman.com and just sign up for one of my email opt-ins where you can get notified. I'm hoping to launch that in next month. That's my goal. I already have a few guys who are already in it and they're getting sick results, but now I'm ready to publicize that over the next month.
Yeah.
And then the last thing
just put a time step. It's early. It's going to be, this is April 30th. We're filming today. So this will probably be out next week. So just to give a
month.
April. Yeah. So it'll be out in early May, 2024. In case you're watching this 100 years from now.
Yeah. Right. May 2024. And then, for those who still may not be, maybe new to coaching, might be interested in having more of a connected conversation just to test the waters. I'm actually offering an opportunity where you can text me a question, voice message me a question, or video a question. I'll reply in kind. And it's minimal, literally minimal investment for that, because I want people to feel like this type of coaching is accessible. So if you want to check that out, just go to theprofessionalwingman.com/ask. It's going to redirect you to an app that I'm on that's called Manect. And once you download the app, you can then ask me a question right there, and you'll be able to hear from me in the next 24 hours.
Very cool. Awesome. All right. Well, I'll drop those links also in the description. So final question, and it's not a question. It's sort of not a question. Are there any questions that I didn't ask you that you wish that I had that you would love to answer or share before we close out?
No, man. I love this conversation. This was really good. I think if anything, I want people to know that I'm really passionate about this. As you can tell in my voice, in my expression, I've been doing this for 15 years. This is what will be my life's work. I can promise you that, without hesitation. But at the same time, while I do take this really seriously and I'm impassioned by it, I also don't take myself seriously. I love having fun. I love kicking back, having laughs. I'm a huge gamer. I love sports. I love hanging out with my bros and just talking about all kinds of amazing things about life. And so I think that's I think that's for me, that's why I love the idea of being a wingman, because it's not just about being support. You are someone's friend. And I've had the great privilege of working with people who are now some of my great friends. And it's just such rewarding work to be able to see what they do out there with the stuff that we do here. But I think the last thing I just want to say is you're never alone. And just know that. And if you do feel that way, reach out to whoever you possibly can and just connect. If you stay connected, you're going to be okay.
Yeah, there's wisdom to be had. There's wisdom that gets passed down, and you ain't going to hear it on mainstream media. You're not probably going to hear that much of it on TikTok. And I think that's part of the issue here is you got to look past the wall of bullshit and reactionary content. Not that it doesn't have its place, but drama is not progress.
Yeah.
Very cool. Well, Thomas, absolute pleasure. I would love to have you on again if you're open to that in the future.
Yeah, brother. Thanks for having me on.
And I think it's going to be some cool opportunities for collaboration. I'm all about what you're into. There was a point where I considered doing the wingman thing myself. I remember thinking it, but it's I've done it unprofessionally. Let's put it that way. My homies will tell you I can be a good wingman. I get it. Well, if for any of you watching, if you have any comments or questions for myself or Thomas, or have any content suggestions, any topics that are on top of your mind you'd like to hear discussed, and just go ahead and drop those in the comments below. And like and subscribe is one way that you can help support the video and get it out to others, support the channel. And with that, Thomas, we can bid you farewell, brother.
Well, I appreciate you, man. Such a great time, and take care, man.
All right. Peace out, guys.